Two things we are going to talk. One, how to subscribe symbol when we have lots of symbol to subscribe, and then how can we mix synchronous and asynchronous function call. So we shall demonstrate that by an example, and that example or the sample code can be found here at this location. So basically that page is here. This is that link where we can download that sample. Here we are showing two proximity sensor, and when its value is true, those are listed in a grid view. That's the idea, and when it is false, then it is removed from this. Let's see how this sample works. I mean, that sample I downloaded from there, and I am just redoing it again for demonstration purpose. So here there is a grid view, and here we have a tag and that value, and there is nothing at this moment, but we can put, for example, let's say I set it to true and I write, and that is here. So upper proximity sensor, and it has true, and then I can change this one, and also this is changed, and if I set it false, both should be removed. And it is a list. We are going to subscribe this one, but this list can be like we have only 3 variables, but we can have thousands or 2000 variables in a list, or we can read it from database. And then we have these 2 variables like we are showing. If this value is true, then we display, and if it is false, then we remove. Here I have totally empty HMI project. There is nothing. In this project we want to show a grid. So let's bring a grid view, data grid, and here we have some default value. We are going to change it like this way. So there will be a tag and value, and how we can change it, that is explained here in this. I mean, this is done with another example, so we can follow that. Right. So I have changed it, and now if we see that properties, we have 2 items, and there is a tag and value. Those are very important. One important thing is that we put it that name tc data grid underscore main. So we name it like script, and inside script we put 2 JavaScript file. One is code behind file. That name can be same, but if we want, we can change it. In code behind file, we can write some global data. So I declare a global variable, like for example my object array. So this will hold the object that will be displayed in grid view. We are using a function read data from remote server, and it will take symbol, and then it will return to value, or it will, if there is error, then it will throw an exception. So this is like converting asynchronous function to synchronous, because as you see we are using regex from backup, and that is actually asynchronous function, as you know, but we are wrapping that one with promise, JavaScript promise, and then that will be we shall treat this as a synchronous. This has been described also in this page. Here we have described that asynchronous and synchronous function, and that probably good to take a look. So read data from server and write data to server. This is like a pair of function normally we use. So one is for reading, another is for writing, but this write data to remote server. We are not going to use it, but I just put it here. So this is like our code behind file, and then we have another function, monitor variable.js. So monitor variable, actually it is a JavaScript function that we shall use for monitoring those two variables that we are showing. So it takes a parameter, but we don't have any parameter, so we just remove that parameter by removing it. Okay, so now basically this is a function that we shall implement, and that will work together with this one. So, and this function will be called when desktop view will be attached. So let's call it already, properties and desktop attached. When it will be attached, then we are going to call it other monitor variable, and now whenever this desktop will be attached, then that function will be called. So here we can define this function. We need a reference to our main grid, so we get that control by this ID, and then we have some other variables like data reading status, but it is not being used actually. So but since it is in our sample, so I just put it there. So then commands are actually a array that will store what symbol we are going to monitor. Result load database, this will hold the array of symbols that is loaded from PLC or from database or anything else. So that means it can be a big array. So we are using only 3 items in this array. We shall define a function. We call a function, and now we are going to define that function. So that function we shall implement actually here. For example, we can implement that function like this. So basically when this function will be called, then load from database will be called, and then this function will be executed. So, and this is asynchronous function because we are going to use these types of function inside that function, inside that load data from database. So, and now we need to wrap with try catch. In this function we want to array for sub. This array we want to read, and so this we need to map, and then we can read it like this way. So, and we are using read data from remote server, and that is defined here, and we are passing this symbol, and then it will return an array. So we can verify or print something just to take a look, and yeah. So at this phase maybe we can try to test this program because this should be loaded, and before that we need to map this. So let's try to map it. Okay, these are already mapped actually, maybe it was I did it previously. So all these necessary stuffs are mapped. most important here is that array for sub. So before subscription, we need to make sure that web socket of TwinCAT HMI server is ready. So we need to guard that. Again, I comment like this because that will match. So now we can do that subscription. We can check that length of this array, and based on that we can start building that commands. So here we are making a object, and in that object there is a key symbol and then that value, and then this object is pushed to that commands. So then this is like one of that step we are targeting. So we don't need to do one by one, as we have done it, like we build this command and now we just in a loop we do everything. So we don't need to follow these types of pattern. So that's, I think, very efficient. And when we have very large number of variables, then doing it like this way is huge task. So we just read it and then we commands are built and we are pushed. This is not necessary actually in our sample, but for some reason I put it in that sample in that website, so I just put it. It's not being used anywhere. Or next we do that subscription. So subscription is a function. So it takes that commands that we have built, and this is like a function subscribe function. This is provided by backup HMI framework, and that takes that commands and then it takes that interval and then it takes a function. So basically this is that function. Inside this function we need to do some checking, and because we can make mistakes here, we are pushing wrong variable, maybe we push some variable that is not in PLC. So these types of case can happen. So we have some default checking that always we do, and those are, I put it just by copy pasting. So these I just added, and here is our end of this subscription function. And now these are like, if something goes wrong then we just don't continue, but we return. We can show some error note to user, for example, but we are not doing that. So we can write here subscribe, because then it's easy to, if something goes wrong then it's easier to trace it. And then we need to go through how many commands we have, we need to go through. So basically we do like this. So we pick one command and then we check if that value has been modified or has been changed. So this function will be called when something has been changed in this command. So we need to identify which command or which data has been modified or changed. So then based on that we react. We put some additional checking. We have a commands, and then we pick one command and then we examine that command, and then we go through all commands here, and there are some additional error check. If for example command was not found, then it can be we cannot continue, and if some error has occurred, then of course we cannot continue. And at this point everything has gone nicely, and we have some inside this function that is being called when data has been changed. So, and now since we are going to monitor two variables, and so if that command symbol contains upper proximity sensor, then we need to do something, or if that symbol, if that commands contain lower proximity sensor, then of course we need to do something also. So what we shall do, and that depends on our requirements, but in this case we have decided that if that value is true, if this proximity sensor value is true, then we show it in our grid view, and if it is false, then we remove it from our grid. We can put some log information just in case if we want to debug. Always we have this read value of this command, actually what value has been passed, what value has been with this variable, that will be given to us with this variable. So we assigned that one read value 1. Now we can build an JavaScript object. So here it is interesting. So command and symbol, we take it and then we put that value to that tag, and then read value we put it to that value. Okay, so this is very important. So if it is, we are not considering yet if it is true or false, but whatever that value comes, we are putting in this value field. And next we are going to consider that what we should do if that read value 1 is true. So if read value 1 is true, then do something, if not, then do other thing. Okay, so we push this object to that my object array, and that has been declared here. So because that read value is true, because our target is to show that variable when it is true, and in other case, since other case it will be false, so we have to remove. And though it came, for some reason it came to false, and if that length is, there is no data, so then we cannot remove. So we have to have some kind of guard. And then there is some technique we use. We use a filter actually used for an array, and that to set some criteria. So we are telling that tag, we are, okay, this name is not very nice because it's, we are passing in each item to that filter, and then it will return. If this is true, then it will return a new array. So when tag and symbol is equal, then it will return a new array. So when this tag and symbol are same, how many it finds, then it will return an array. So D is actually array, and if that length is greater than 0, so that means there has been something, then we can find that index of that item. Now we do a splice, and that means like, okay, at this index remove one item, so then it will be removed. So now this function is ready. Okay, there is another thing actually, because now we have modified this array, so we need to update that data. So either we have pushed data or we have removed data. So in either case we need to set that source data for that grid view. Create an from this array to string, and then we set it that source of that grid data, and then it will be updated. And same thing will be used for this one, and I am doing now copy pasting exactly. So basically exactly same one. So we are having this different variable or different symbol, otherwise this code is exactly same. So here same way we are modifying that source data, and now we can do some formatting just to make sure that these are, yeah. So this is basically our code, and now let's try to compile. Let's log in. We can go to the desktop and we can select HMI, and we can for proximity sensor true, and it is true. Lower proximity sensor true, and we remove it, and that is removed, and that is removed. And if we put both, okay, so that works.